Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Panel 8, the FTTH rollout challenges beyond 90% coverage. My name's Ian Adkins. I am a partner at Analysis Mason. We are a technology, media, and telecoms advisory company. And I should just plug the fact that as part of this panel, we've prepared a paper, which Vincent yesterday explained you could download various papers that were published with the conference. This one's called High Levels of FTTH Coverage Are Achievable with Bold Decisions by Policymakers. So there's a few clues in there about what we're going to talk about today. The panel will introduce themselves as they each do an opening statement. So without further ado, I will ask Gary to please make your opening statement.
Thanks, Ian. Good morning, everyone. Wow, what a reception. Good morning, everyone. All right. Well, I'm Gary Bolton. I'm with the Fibre Broadband Association. Anybody heard of that? All right. Anybody members? All right. Well, thank you guys for coming. So today we're talking about rural broadband, and in the U.S., you know, one of the big challenges is that we had this $1 trillion infrastructure bill that was signed by the president at the time, Joe Biden. It was in November 15th, 2021. Well, lots happened since then. So back in November 6th of this past year, the Democrats lost the White House. Both chambers of Congress went to the Republicans. And now we have a new world order. So we have complete shift in politics and sentiment. So that's really changing the dynamics of how things are playing out in the U.S. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But just where we are in fiber deployment, you know, in the U.S., it's the largest fiber investment cycle in history. And 2 years ago, 2023, we hit 9.1 million homes passed. Last year, we hit a record of 10.3 million homes passed. So things are going quite well. And when you look at overall, there's about 130 million homes across the U.S. that we have fiber passed, 76 million unique homes in the U.S. And I mentioned that we had this huge infrastructure investment. So out of this $1 trillion, there's about $60 billion that was earmarked for broadband, and $42.45 billion of that was to be able to get to the unserved and underserved Americans. That's about 5.5 million homes right now. And then when you look at that $42 billion, you add the 25% match, it comes up to about $60 billion of government, you know, the federal government subsidies to be able to get to rural America. And so we had Cartesian take a look and see, of all the different states, there's 56 states and territories, can we get fiber to every single state? And so the first 3 states that have their final approvals, so Delaware is 100% fiber. Louisiana was able to get awards for 95.4% of their locations with fiber. And then we had Nevada, which has significantly less money. It's out in the west. It's very difficult terrain. We had handicapped them to be able to get to about 73%. They actually outperformed and got to about 80% fiber passed. But with the new political environment, you might have heard of this guy called Elon Musk. Anybody heard of this guy, Elon Musk? I think he drives Teslas and so forth. So there's become an infatuation at the White House for low Earth orbit satellites. And the way we looked at this saying, okay, is this a real threat to being able to, because why wouldn't you just get fiber everywhere? And so we looked at the capacity of low Earth orbit satellites, and there's really 3 things that determine the capacity. First is the capacity of each satellite. So they, right now, if you look at Starlink, they have the V5 1.5s. The other is how many satellites can you put in the sky? So that's the whole constellation. And the third and most important part is spectrum. You have to send radio waves up to space, and you have to have these spot beams coming down to your serving areas. And these spot beams are serving about 100 square miles. And so when Cartesian looked at this, we saw that today, if we look at like a Starlink satellite, which is the largest constellation, they can get to about 2 million subscribers in the U.S. They, at the beginning of the year, they had 1.4 million, so that's about 600,000 subscribers that they have less for their capacity. But when you look out to the end of the decade, when they go from the Falcon 9 to Starship, they have more launch capacity. They go from the 1.5 satellites to 2.0 satellites. They have much more capacity. It really comes down the spectrum. And so looking at all this, it basically says that Starlink can serve 1 subscriber per square mile, 1 subscriber per square mile, and meet the statute that Congress set for the infrastructure program, which was 100 megabits downstream, 20 megabits upstream. And so then once they have all these satellites in the sky and these higher capacity satellites, they can only get to 3 locations per square mile. So this isn't going to be a solution that can serve every American or anywhere, that and be able to deliver the capacity that you need. It's something that can go to a very, very rural area that's impossible to meet and be able to address those very low density. And then when you also look at it on a performance, no surprise to anybody in this room, satellites have the worst performance, fiber has the best performance. And then from a subscriber perspective, satellite's the most expensive. It's about twice as expensive as fiber. So it's not great for a consumer. They already have it available today. So the government subsidies really need to be building out critical infrastructure. And so when you look at private investment across the U.S., last fall, John Stankey of AT&T announced that AT&T is going to get to 50 million homes passed with private investment by the 2029. And so why are they putting their own money to get fiber? Well, because it significantly advances their business case. It allows them to get faster penetration, higher revenue per user, it reduces their churn, and then it's also on a convergence. When you have more fiber, you also have more wireless customers. So it makes a great sense for private investment to everywhere they can reach. And then take Hawaiian Tel. I had Sue Shen on my, anybody ever listen to my Fiber for breakfast? All right, thank you guys. So Sue Shen, if you haven't seen that, she's awesome, the president of Hawaiian Tel. So they were going to get $149 million from the government. They say that's not enough. So Hawaiian Tel put their own capital in, over $1 billion for a total of $1.7 billion. And they're going to get fiber to every home in Hawaii by the end of next year, not the end of the decade, by the end of next year. And so then when you are able to get fiber to that everybody across the U.S., our studies from our sustainability working group show that it significantly reduces the carbon footprint. So not only are we going to be able to elevate the quality of life for generations to come, we're going to be good stewards of the planet so we can leave behind a sustainable planet. And then when consumers have the choice between fiber and any other technology, our studies show that fiber gains 14, 15 points of market share, and where it's taken away is from cable and from geo satellite. It used to take it away from wireless, fixed wireless, but we have seen a little fixed wireless bubble in the U.S. So, that's unfortunately going to get squeezed out by LEO since there's so much political push for LEO satellites. It's going to be really, it's taking the edge cases, so it's going to be fiber and then kind of satellite. So fiber is going to elevate the quality of life for generations to come, and I will pass it on to my next presenter. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Gary. Hi, good morning, everyone. So here we are. Having a thought on how to enter into this introduction and the pros and cons on being part of this panel on the fifth day, the first in the morning, and as you can know, all after the vibration night, so really appreciate your attention to here. And the occupation of the room demonstrates the successful party of the last night. But there is another topic which is very relevant, which is the opportunity to bring the latest figures that were disclosed yesterday in the keynote from Vincent, talking about the latest report. And let me start with some figures before going into the point of this session. So yesterday we realized that the coverage at the European level is 75% at the moment in the EU39 market, while the take-up is at 53%. Significant figures. Also realizing that the initiatives identified are more than 430, combining private and public. And 55% of the initiatives are still driven by alternative operators. So figures extremely interesting. But there is another figure. I was also shocked by the warning message, I would say, that what about if we are sailing the 90% coverage? And that's the topic of the session today. What are the challenges beyond this 90%? And yesterday we saw in the keynote from Vincent that it could be like the sailing for the current projections of the deployments. So let me start. My name is Pedro Abad. I'm CEO of Asteo Red Neutra. We are a neutral operator coming from Spain, and we are focused on rural deployments. And let me connect both concepts. Spain stays at almost 90% today. So the projection that we showed yesterday is actually a reality for us. And you can see the consistent performance of Spain during the last years when it comes to the FTTH deployment. So our reality today is that we see how it looks like when you are at the 90%. Let me go a little bit further. Let's talk about our demographics. We used to say that Spain is a rural country, and we base our statement on the fact that the distribution of our municipalities, as you can see on the screen, is very dispersed, where we have more than 8,000 municipalities already registered, but only 114 are over 50,000 inhabitants. So it's very concentrated, the population density. In the other side, we have almost 60% of the entire number of municipalities, or even 84%, which are below 5,000 inhabitants. So very small, very rural areas. And the FTTH coverage, as you can see, is over 90%, but is just reaching these highest density areas for sure, but also semi-urban and rural areas. So what's left? That's the point today. What's left in Spain? Let me try to show you this a bit more visual. I asked the IEA to get an image of how the population density could be represented in an image, and we got this. I think it's very visual. And that's the example for us, how the population is concentrated in our country. Well, you can see that 60% of the population is in the inner circle, in the large cities, of course. And then we have another 20%, which is in the semi-urban areas, in small cities. And then it becomes rural. We have another 10%, not that far from the cities. And of course, what we call ultra-rural, the other 10%. And the coverage, in terms of FTTH, as we said, is reaching 90%. So you can see very clearly here what is left. Is difficult executional areas to be connected with a lot of, let's say, environmental conditioning. And of course, the distances and the way we need to cover that is not that simple. FTTH used to be born in the cities, and now what is left and the future for Europe is that we need to think about that society that decides to live in the rural. And this is the point for us. This is the whole point. We connect the challenges directly to the rural. And if I can go a bit further, I would say the backhaul. I used to say this is chicken and egg. In the rural, there is no FTTH because there is no transmission. There is no backhaul or backbone available to support the FTTH deployment. So it's that simple. The FTTH is like the last mile, as we all know in this room. So the challenges, the way we see this in Spain, are extremely connected to the backhaul deployment. At Asteo, we do our own backhaul, and then we do the FTTH. So let me go a little bit further into this introduction. How we are approaching to this rural deployment. We have three key pillars. The first is regarding the engineering and the project management, and very important, the civil work permits. Administrations, for us, are key. You will see now why. Second, for us, is the execution. I will go also into details about that. And third, last but not least, obviously, is the technology adoption and the business model. It's all about take-up as well, because we are investing significant capex, but obviously, you know, the key here is the financials. We'll come over the session later with my colleagues. So step by step, how we are going. In the first pillar, this project management, I emphasize how relevant it is to get the permissions to make our job. So basically, on average, you see on the bottom box, that's a real example of the different permits that we are in process for one of our regions, that on average, you can consider for us to connect from municipality A to municipality B, we need to take between 10 and 12 different permits from different public administrations and entities. So it takes a lot of efforts from our side. The way we manage this, we have assigned a dedicated team just to interface with the public administrations, and we are also applying a retail concept. Basically, we define a call center just to call Monday to Friday, 8 to 3 p.m., to the different administrations just to request, I would say in this way, how to progress on our permits for our execution. So for us, this is extremely key, project planning and administration's interaction. Second, the rollout execution. I will put a second here as well, because going to rural, our life is like you can see in the machinery. We have defined a methodology totally adapted to these backhaul requirements, where we try to be very consistent, but also very friendly to the environment. And we have innovated by incorporating the cable into the duct on factory before going into the digging with our machineries. This way, our machineries are equipped with the cable, and at the time we dig, we put the cable on the duct. With this, we avoid to do a lot of efforts on this execution. This has been key for us to optimize our time frame. For example, now we take to connect one municipality to the next, on average they are between 5 and 10 kilometers, we can do in less than a week. Actually, 2-3 days, we can execute this. And FTTH takes another week. So in 2 weeks, we can connect from one municipality to the next. If everything goes smooth, we can activate that municipality immediately, very fast. So time to market, that's the word here. And third, the technology adoption. For us, it's also key to relate both efforts, not just roll out and then let's sit and see. We are very dynamic and active on promoting the adoption of technology by being a neutral open network, and a neutral operator, where we also trying to take care of the difficult part of the execution, with each installation in the rural, and also the activation of the municipalities and the configuration and commissioning of the service. So at the end, what we try is to optimize the time efforts for the client to get the service as soon as possible. This all connected to the project planning. And of course, the maintenance in the territory is extremely key. We don't face, hopefully, I'm crossing fingers, our CTO is here present in the room, but we don't have that many incidents, but if you have it, you need to respond immediately, very quickly. Our clients, the ISPs, demand a high level of service on SLAs. So far, so good. Asteo is a young company. This June 25, we will celebrate our 4th anniversary. And as of today, we are connecting almost 600 municipalities with this design that I already explained to you. By designing and defining this backhaul, I don't know if you can see the image, but the blue icons represent the municipalities. That's one of the regions, Segovia region, one of the regions in the center of the country. And with the green light is our backhaul by connecting all those municipalities. And again, the last step is that by doing this, you can connect the last with the first map. We are trying to create an alternative routing by connecting cross-border projects from Lisbon, submarine cables coming over, a lot of them, to Madrid, a relevant and significant hub for digitalization in our country, to Bilbao and south of France. So here the challenge is how we are putting rural at the center of the digitalization transportation by creating this backhaul network that you can see here on screen. So all in all, I would like to finalize my introduction by saying that we, in a humble way, please don't get me wrong, but we consider that Asteo is a pure expert on rural rollout, and that's the point for the remaining challenge, for this 10% remaining challenge, when everybody will be there. And just to finalize, I would like to show you a short video to put it a nicer way than my words, what we are doing. Thank you. Mauri, on the video.
Oh, you press when it's...
It's supposed to be a sound, but well, it takes 30 seconds. Yes, thank you. Did you like it? Thank you.
So I'm Amaury de Gromard, working for Swisscom since a while also, but I'm not there to decline my CV in front of you. It's not interesting. I'm here, you know, to share a story, and it's a story of the Swiss people and the story of Swisscom. This story has started about 150 years ago. At those times, what did we do? Or not I, you can see. We started to build the network. And 100 years ago, what did we do? We were the first one installing an automatic switch. So Swisscom, we really like innovation. I'm not going to decline all the technology evolutions that we did. I think we are knowing all of them, all those technologies, so I will avoid this long story. But let me keep me short. What did we achieve and where do we stand in our network now? Let's think together. 80%, or we bring 80 megabits per second to more than 90% of the population of Switzerland. That with copper. I say it again, 80 mega per second is a very strong power. It's a very strong foundation for the Swiss people to enjoy high-speed internet already. And we reach that with copper. The specialty of Switzerland is also to have universal service obligation. And in this obligation, we need to bring fiber, or to bring fiber speed, or 80 mega, to the whole location of Switzerland. And maybe we have a few pictures in the mind. If you think about James Bond, on the top of the mountain, here in a hotel, you have, and we bring 80 mega there also. So that's a part of the first step of the story. But we like 80 mega, but it seems small. But if we talk about 200 megabits per second, that seems to be big, only achievable with fiber. I just tell you, no. It's pretty simple. By us, 85% of the population is enjoying this speed with a mix of technology. So we are convinced with step-by-step approach, we are able to bring speed to the customer. So in my speech, what is extremely important is to make one step back on the technology, put the people in the middle of the story. And now, the last point that where we are is really to bring also fiber in the middle of the city, like in Spain. And here, sure, we do it step by step, exactly like you build. The small difference with you is that we are starting downstairs and getting up. It's a small difference with a flat picture. But now we are reaching more than 50% coverage, and the Swiss also, iDate has recently presented also the last result is we are at 57% of FTTH coverage. So it's once again very interesting. FTTH Council presents a mix of the different technologies. Now, this is a strong, really strong position, strong evolution, and doing it really for customer. What is the next step for Swisscom? We want to bring the giga everywhere, or close to the giga. How is our plan? What we want to do is already, at the end of this year, to reach Swisscom a coverage of 57% FTTH built and marketable. The next step for us is 2030. In 2030, the first that we want is to start FTTH nearly in all municipalities of Switzerland. You can imagine the smallest city of Switzerland is about 30 people. So we are talking about rural. And sometimes those small cities are also quite high above the sea. So it's a kind of symmetry with Amsterdam. What the next step also is for us is to bring fiber from 75% to 85% of coverage by 2030. So that is very ambitious level. But at this time, the game is not over. What we recently announced is we want to enable copper phase-out by 2035. So it seems to be a 10 years period. Yeah, it seems to be long. No, it's very short. Because the last bit to build, we foresee to build at least 90% of Switzerland with the FTTH, and then we have our about 10% remaining. The 10% remaining is quite a headache for us, but I think we will have to find solution. The way that we have foreseen to make it happen is also, again, a mix of technology. Fiber has its role to play. We think also of mobile and also of satellite. The question is really to find the right mix for the next future and the right way to make it happen. And keeping in mind, to close my speech here, is really, why do we do all this transformation? We do it for people. We do it because we are strongly believing that bringing broadband at the top of the mountains with the speed of light is very important for our customer and also for the evolution. And not only for customer, also for Swisscom, because like everybody knows, it saves cost, it's more stability for us, and we are being to prepare the network for the next 100 years. But we need banks for it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Johanna Reinkemeyer, and I'm working for Landesbank Baden-Württemberg, LBBW. That's a German bank. So changing the perspective here from the operator side to the financing side. First of all, maybe to give you a bit of background on what are we doing. We are a German bank that is quite active in financing digital infrastructure. I'm part of the infrastructure team at LBBW. So I've personally started my professional career in 2011. They're more on the infrastructure PPP financing side. And since 2016, I've been financing digital infrastructure, so fiber providers, data centers, towercos. So maybe something around LBBW. Who are we? We have more than 10,000 employees. We have 16 locations worldwide, and our balance sheet is a bit more than 360 billion euros. We have a pretty solid rating from Moody's by AA with AA+, AA2. And our ownership is divided between the state of Baden-Württemberg, the city of Stuttgart, and the Savings Bank Association of Baden-Württemberg. So quite a solid foundation, very much grounded in the region of Baden-Württemberg, but we're pretty much active across Europe. So maybe to give you an overview on what are we doing in infrastructure finance, and I think this is also important to understand our perspective that we have on fiber. Yeah, so we have about 1/3 of our activities is in Germany, our home country, yeah, that we know best, where we obviously also have the closest link to our clients. Another third is the EU, and then the rest is divided basically between UK and Ireland, and North America. That's basically the US. We are about 1/3 of our portfolio is in digital infrastructure, another third is in renewable energy, but we're also active in social infrastructure and in energy infrastructure and anything related to infrastructure. This is the expertise that we're having. So this is basically a summary of all the companies that we've been supporting in fiber. It says digital infrastructure, but that excludes data centers and towercos, to be honest. So that's just you can see. I mean, we are active across Europe, and this also sets the scene for this panel. So how can, if you want to connect the last 10% in a certain country with fiber, how can you make that attractive for a financing provider? I mean, you saw we are active across Europe, yeah, so a financing that we're looking at may compete to another financing in another country, and that's also valid for sectors. So if I have a fiber financing on my desk, a colleague of mine will be working on a data center financing, and another colleague of mine will be working on energy infrastructure. So all these different kind of projects, in a way, compete to each other for financing. I don't really see a scarcity of financing in general for infrastructure financing, but just so that you understand. And when it comes to FTTH, I mean, how, from a financing perspective, how has the market developed? I mean, obviously there has been a lot of growth over the last years, and there also has been, I mean, there is still a way to go. This is especially valid, obviously, for my home country, Germany, where we are, where we still have to deploy a lot in order to get to very good coverage levels. But we have seen some fiber operators that are, or that have been significantly behind their business plans due to macroeconomic issues, due to the rise in interest rates, but also due to some other factors, like, for example, in Germany, a bit of a delay in the take-up penetration rate. So when I'm presenting a fiber case internally, that really needs to be rock solid, yeah. And if I'm talking about a subsidy scheme involved, for example, to include in such a financing, I think what is important for me is that the whole package needs to be attractive from a financing perspective, and I think this is like the contribution that I can make to this panel. Thank you.
Good morning. A little story just to get us started and set the context. Maybe think back to where you were in 2014. I had a look. Maybe you were at this conference actually in 2014. It was in Stockholm. I see some of my Swedish colleagues here. Very successful FTTH Council in Stockholm that year. FTTH Council not yet 10 years old at that time. FTTH in its infancy across Europe. In Ireland, very much in its infancy, not much happening. I want to call out Cyro, who won Operator of the Year here yesterday, had not started any deployment in Ireland in 2014. So where was I in 2014? I had started a new job. I just moved out of the private sector, and I'd moved into the government ministry responsible for telecoms in Ireland. The ministry is not just for communications, it covers all of energy, it covers environmental issues, inland fisheries, climate action, geological survey, lots and lots of things. In one of my first weeks working in the department, the new minister, very famous guy, called an all-hands meeting. There's lots of offices across Ireland. He brought everyone together in a conference centre, not dissimilar to this one, maybe a bit bigger actually, 600-700 people. And he stood up in front of everyone and he said, I have 3 priorities while I'm in government that I'm going to make happen. And my number 1 priority is broadband. And my number 2 priority is broadband. And my number 3 priority is broadband. And I remember sitting in the audience and someone nudging me and saying, well, best of luck with the new job. Right? So that's where I started in 2014. At that point in time, there was an ambition in government to bring high-speed broadband out to every home in the country. The digital agenda for Europe was to bring 30 megabit. So it was a bit I suppose at that point, that was the ambition level. So we set out on a journey, and we very quickly understood that commercial operators would target, as Pedro's pointed out, the urban areas, suburban areas, and the large towns across Ireland. That constituted about 75% of the premises in Ireland. And a very important cohort of the sector was to make sure that happened. So one of the first things we did is we set up a task force chaired by 2 government ministers, brought all the municipalities, all the local government together with the operators to try and remove barriers to that commercial investment. And it's unique across Europe that we had such a focus, a task force reporting directly into central government and to try and make that happen. And that's been very successful. And the commercial development of gigabit broadband in particular has happened very successfully over the last 10 years in Ireland. And then on the other side, we recognise that the commerciality of the last 25% of premises in Ireland wasn't there. The operators will not ever develop there to any significant degree. So that's where we focused our efforts to create a project that would intervene through government subsidy. So that was a very high challenge for us to create a new strategy that would develop the infrastructure that would last a long term, over a long period, for the people and premises that exist in that area. So I suppose we were talking with the last 10%. So in 2014, we would have said we're working from the very most remote, the hardest to get, and we're working back towards where the commercial operators are saying that they will get to. So I like the James Bond reference, very good. In Ireland, that would be islands. It would be farms on the top of mountains and hills, and it'll be where there's very, very low density. We don't have large conurbations of people together. We have dotted and one-off developments across rural Ireland. And it's quite a challenge from an infrastructure perspective. So from 2014, 2015, we developed a strategy. We came up with a very large procurement. We secured funding from the government, central government, for that procurement. We got through a very substantial state aid notification. And through that time, it was intense scrutiny. I just looking at some stats, there was 5,500 articles on mainstream media printed over the time, so about 1,000 articles a year. We were hauled in front of government committees and up to the Parliament, briefings for lobby groups. We appeared on lots of TV programs. There was a huge amount of intensive scrutiny because broadband at the time was the #1 priority politically. It was the #1 thing on the tip of everyone's tongue for 5 years until we had the plan settled. But in 2019, we signed and we finished the procurement, the public procurement, and we signed what is the largest government investment in rural Ireland ever. It's a €2.7 billion contract. It's matched by up to €5 billion in total project funding. But what has happened since has been a success story. I suppose in some ways, with COVID kicking in 2020, it delayed the rollout at the start, but now the deployment of fibre in the rural areas is ahead of time. It's under budget, and it's expected to deliver more positive outcomes for the citizen than it was ever anticipated. On the other side of the house, the commercial development has happened extremely strongly. We're now at 87% gigabit penetration in the country. We expect to be at 100, and we've set a target to be at 100% by 2028. Commercial operators expect to finish late next year. We expect that the intervention project will also finish sometime next year. But we do see that there is a cohort left. And our last 10% is probably a much smaller percentage. It's 1 or 2%, are now in pockets within suburban areas, pockets within some towns and villages. They're not in the very rural areas because the intervention has taken care of that. But we now have a refocus as to how do we pick up those, I call them black spots, in those suburban areas. And they're not caused by low population density, they're caused by other means. And I think we're going to talk about that now in a second. So that's my story, and I'm happy to share my experience today. So thank you.
Yeah, well done, each of you, for that. I'd like to just summarise some of the key messages that this panel is about. I think that's finished with a really upbeat message. We talk about challenges beyond 90%, and more than once we hear how that is achievable. It can be achieved, and it's no accident that who we've got on the panel is a mixture of operators, finance, and government, because more than likely to get very high levels of FTTH coverage, the government and government subsidy is going to be needed. And therefore, when I point at people, I'm not being rude, I mean that people need to collaborate and join together. And that is a key message from this team that has been brought together as a panel. What I'd also like to reflect on, because you've sort of answered the first question mostly, is the point about each person is from a different country. You've heard, if you've been listening carefully, I hope you're all still with us, that the characteristics of what this 90% and above challenge is in each place is very, very localized. It needs very localized solutions. So I suppose what I'd like to do is just move to sort of what I'd call the next question, which is sort of the critical success factors, a couple of top ones each that you think are necessary to reach beyond 90%. I'll start with you, Patrick, because you've sort of left your speech sort of where you would you be able to sort of characterize what were the success factors of the scheme?
Okay, well, I'd re-emphasize what Ian just said there, that it is very localized, the characteristics of where these last X% is in any country. I've certainly learned that. I've visited a lot of countries, and I experienced, and I'm very interested in how you explained it there, Pedro, but that doesn't translate to everywhere. There's different characteristics depending where you go. And I'll give one example on the suburban areas, and I think this exists in Germany, actually. Germany, that there is, rather than the legacy copper network was delivered through buried lead rather than through ducting. And that creates a very difficult scenario in suburban areas in particular, where you're trying to follow the ducting. If there is no ducting there, it means you're relaying. The commerciality of that is very difficult. So that'll be the type of issue that we see now emerging in Ireland, right? So if I come back to your question now, is what are the critical success factors? So one of the critical success factors, in my view, is understanding. It's getting the information about what exists today, understanding where the issues are and what the issues are. Because what I think where we are at now, you can't characterize the issues into this is the issue. It's not one single issue. Direct buried leads probably constitute some of the issue, right? But there's lots of others. There could be administrative barriers like permitting. There could be getting across critical infrastructure like rail tracks and stuff like this. So first critical success factor is understanding, and it's mapping, and it's getting the information together so that you can understand what the problem is. And that's it might sound simple, but we put a lot of effort into that now. And operators in Ireland will know because we're continually polling them for information. And then the second critical success factor is to design the solution to that specific circumstance. So I'll go back to direct buried leads where there's no duct, there's just a copper lead. We're looking at different solutions for that. We're thinking, does the municipality create a utility duct that everyone can use, you know, or do we give out grants to operators to overcome that, or do we incentivize, or do we regulate, or do we, you know, there's lots of different ways to solve these problems. So I think one of the second critical success factors is designing an appropriate solution to the specific issue and trialing and testing that. So they're the two things I'd suggest.
That's great. We've got some of that in there, Pat.
Oh, have you?
Okay. Joanna.
Yeah, maybe on the German perspective, I mean, obviously we are very far away from 90% coverage. So I think we are around 40%, but obviously actual take-up rates are much lower. So I think the current focus is more on, I mean, in Germany there is a lot of rules, yeah, around how to lay fiber in the ground. For example, that you have to dig at least around 60 centimeters below the ground. Obviously, that's then much more costly than if you can just throw an aerial cable. Yeah, maybe that's a bit simplified. But I think this is what makes fiber deployment in Germany so costly and so capex intensive, again, also from a financing perspective. And I think there is a lot of potential efficiencies, obviously. Yeah? I mean, if you lower all these permitting requirements and if you find alternative solutions for the last 10%, yeah, you could substantially lower the subsidies that would be needed.
Yeah, that's sort of some of the key points we keep hearing about barriers. We hear barriers it has to go alongside the subsidy, otherwise you're not getting the collaboration either. Right, Amory, what's your?
I will build on Patrick's arguments, and the knowledge of the location is extremely important. And I would start with, okay, our factor is really to maximize ROI. So I'm speaking for my bank. And here, what I consider in the return on investment is a very important point, the revenue. Here we have to maximize it. We need to really not understand and not underestimate the fact that bringing bandwidth up to the mountains or bringing bandwidth in those rural areas, it's going to increase your ARPU. That has to be definitely considered, understood, considered, and taken into account. How you want to maximize it? It's speed. You said it also in your speech. Yeah. We have to bring bandwidth fast. We have between the time where we start to communicate it until the time we activate the customer, migrate customer to fiber, that has to be fast, or the fastest possible. So that's the type of part of the customer side. On the side of understanding the costs, it's not about only the cost of rollout, it's the cost of maintenance also. We should not think about very short time. We should really think the cable will be there for 50 years. So let's think big and long time. And there, this has opportunity really how to reduce the cost of rollout with trying to cooperate with local entities, cooperate with municipality, with electrical companies. We have really to be creative in those success. And the last bit is also thinking long time to enable to really reduce all the OPEX, and that has to enter in all to the mathematical formulas, is copper, bringing the cost of copper down will enable to save costs, and those costs can be reinvested into fiber. Okay. So understanding really in details and being fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Pedro, what are your top two?
I think the answer, I would mention 2 points in addition to the ones that you already listed, but in other words, or coming from the operational angle, I would say first, definitely for us, is this alignment, Patrick, you're referring to, alignment between public and private initiatives is definitely key to work together. Otherwise, the execution become, as I show in the permits journey, is almost a disaster. So this is one of the key factors, definitely. The misalignment is killing the performance on deployments. Second, I would say this tech adoption that you are mentioning, Amaury, because at the end, everything becomes financials. So if we can manage our cash flow, Joanna, it's not able to be, again, reinvested. So rollout is just the first step. we need to think about take-up. Is the key, is the elephant in the room, I guess, definitely. And then I would say these execution requirements. I'm referring that even in Spain, we also have mountains. So just trying to adapt our rollouts always to the environment is definitely key. We need to innovate not only on technology, but also on rollouts methodologies. So that's key. If you don't find a way to adapt to the environment, you cannot be there. I imagine that James Bond movie and how to reach that by broadband is a real challenge, I can imagine. And last but not least is the combined technology solutions. You also referred to that, Amaury. I guess it's key to find that fiber is just the ground for other technologies, for example, 5G. If we want to offer a pure 5G services, we need to connect by fiber those antennas. And if we don't want to miss 5G rollouts, we need to connect fiber deployment with 5G rollouts, which is the next challenge for Europe, at least in our country, in the Spanish market. Fiber is going quickly, as we all know, because of figures, but now the question mark for us is, what about 5G? So somehow, technology should be also interconnected.
Yes, so it's all part of the wider connectivity offer for the end users. So your point about take-up, I think, was also a key message from yesterday. Adoption was lower than is probably
50-50.
Supportive of financing. We'll come back to that in a minute. And clearly it has to go alongside any sort of deployment plans. Gary, it'd be interesting to hear sort of the US perspective on this.
Yes, certainly in the US, I would say political will is the biggest, I'd say the only impediment to being able to get everybody connected. Money's not an issue. We saw during COVID, countries around the world, we printed trillions and trillions of dollars. We have the ability, and when you invest in infrastructure, it's very accretive, right? So there's a huge GDP growth when you start to invest in infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And so the problem we have, especially in the US and around the world, is that politicians want to define broadband and infrastructure. They use speed as a proxy. Speed is probably the worst proxy and why do they do that? They do that to be able to open the door for all different constituents, right? So they want to make the bar as low as possible. And I'll give you an example of why that fails. In the US, we had a program called Connect America, and we had billions of dollars from the FCC to be able to connect underserved Americans. And at that time, the definition of broadband was 4 megabits by 1 megabit. And so you spent billions of dollars to operators. They deployed DSL technology, and then they came up with the next round of the program, and the definition of broadband was 10 megabits by 1 megabit. So you re-subsidize the same locations over again, because when you tell someone, an operator, you hand them billions of dollars and say, get 4 megabits to this subscriber, and we'll give you this money, what are they going to do? They're going to give 4 megabits to that subscriber. And then when you say, okay, now the new definition is 10 megabits, we're going to now spend again to that same subscriber 10 megabits. And then it went to 25 megabits by 3 megabits. So now where are we now? The government defined in 2021, broadband was 100 megabits downstream by 20 megabits upstream. The Biden administration said it was going to be 100 by 100, but the wireless the industry said, whoa, 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 then we won't be able to participate, right? So it's spreading money around like candy. And when you think about, and that's again why satellite now is bubbling up, it's like, well, let's keep the definition as low as possible, and then we can be able to throw all kinds of different technologies and be able to spread the money around. And then who suffers? These rural consumers. And then you look at even the federal budget. The lion's share of our federal budget is to address the symptoms of all our societal issues. But if we are able to build out critical infrastructure that we can build upon, so why is infrastructure so accretive? Is because when you put fiber out, not only are you able to give gigabits or tens of gigabits or terabits to somebody, which is great, but now you can be able to provide quantum networking, right? You'll be able to have the metaverse. You'll be able to get to AI fiber home. So you're building out, and we talked about 5G. When you put fiber out to a rural area, now you can put cell towers up and be able to get, because 80% of every phone call or video you put across your phone goes to the fixed infrastructure. And so by building out critical infrastructure, we're able to solve this issue once and for all. Those communities that we're now able to serve, they all have economic development, they get AI data centers, they're able to raise the tax base, and this money has incredible return on investment. So it really comes down to political will.
The one answer.
I can give you more, but
No, that's so that no. This leads nicely to the key point, I think, was with very high coverage, you're getting across the message. One, it needs to be on infrastructure, because it sounds like there was a lot of misalignments with early speed on speed on speed, and you just...
It continues, and it's the politics, and it's really, a friend of mine, Dr. Chris Alley, likes to say, broadband's about the people, and when it's not, it's about politics. And that's really what gets in the way of, so when you do something what's right for people, you're always going to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And when it's not about people, then you can imagine what's going on.
And I think what Patrick explained is that political will became very, very strong as part of the Irish National Broadband Plan. So the other key point I'd make is that we're all naturally talking about subsidy, but we've also talked about public-private combinations. So I'd like to ask the next question to Johanna to start with. So what do we need to do to be able to finance beyond 90% coverage?
Yeah. I think for a debt provider, first of all, one thing that is important is the certainty of cash flows. And I think that's a plus if you are in ultra-rural areas, because there is basically no reason whatsoever to overbuild. You don't have any, as a banker, you don't have any competition on the infrastructure, so that's a plus. If you have subsidies involved, I think there are certain elements that need to be taken into consideration. First one is it shouldn't be too complicated, because if it gets complicated, I'm basically in sales. I get the deal on my desk, I'll have a look at it, and I need to discuss it with my risk management. I need to convince our head of risk. I need to take that deal to credit committee, and I need to explain it to everyone. And if the mechanism is very complicated, like the subsidy scheme, I probably have higher difficulties in getting that through. So I think that's one thing. Second thing is scale, scalability. Subsidy schemes in different countries are designed or set up in different ways. And I think from a financing, but probably also from an investor perspective, it's always more favorable if you can aggregate certain projects, if you can combine that to a larger set of projects in which certain parameters are all the same. So you just need to understand that once, basically, And the third thing is basically, investment, or the certainty of the mechanism, the certainty that I have in, if I have a subsidy mechanism where I'm not 100% sure about how it's going to be interpreted, or there is a bit of uncertainty in the end, because obviously it has to be pre-financed at the level of the operator, and the operator wants to get his money back from the public agencies. And if a situation can occur in which that certainty isn't there, in which a situation can occur that the public agency may say, now you laid all the fiber in the ground, and now you want the subsidy for it, and you're just waiting for my final confirmation, but I'm not giving it to you because I was having other requirements, or these were meant in X, Y, Z way. I think that brings uncertainty with it, and that makes it more less attractive, basically. So I think it's scale, it's simplicity, and it's really the investment certainty, if that is a word.
Yes, yeah. Patrick, do you want to take the next answer because
Yeah, thanks. You on a very interesting perspective. When I look at a subsidized project, because that's my experience, there's three investors, right, potentially. There's the government, there's operator raised finance, and potentially a bank, right? And in certainly in the Irish context, but in the vast majority of subsidy projects I'm aware of, the major investor is the government, right? They're taking they're pushing a sufficient funding into the project to make it viable for the commercial operator to exist. But the bank's perspective has been to apply a security arrangements into that triumvirate, which favours the bank. And if you take the government's perspective, firstly, there's state aid rules. So I appreciate what you're saying about simplification, but there is legal requirements for an estate to adopt all the mechanisms to comply with state aid rules, which brings complexity. And secondly, we have our own public spending code. For spending Irish Exchequer money, you have to have certain checks and balances, right? So those projects, they're mega projects, there's a lot of money involved. They come pre-packed with a certain level of complexity. The banks come pre-loaded with a security arrangement which is incompatible with those. And where we ended up in Ireland was the banks really didn't participate strongly in the project. It was the operators, private financing, equity came into it, and the government. The banks, even though there was a huge amount of interest, and we did lots of calls and we did lots of investor, I think, but if a bank wants first call on assets, that's not feasible if they're only putting in 5% of the financing or 10%, and the government's putting in 80 and 90%. That can't happen. So there needs to be, I think, a meeting of minds there. Now, the solution we did come up with, which I thought was quite innovative and did work, was that the major feedback to us is that at the start of this project, the risk profile of the project is extremely high. This is why commercial operators don't want to go near it. So how do you identify and mitigate that risk? So what we did is we identified 12 major drivers of risk and potential costs in the project that were known, but they were unknown. You couldn't quantify the impact they'd have on an infrastructure project. An example would be, there was a fear of labour inflation over a long-term infrastructure build. So when we talked to the operators, they priced into their bids, a very high potential labour inflation, cost of labour, and we're going, that's not going to happen, So what we decided to do is that we'll take that risk. So the risk was borne by the government that if there is unanticipated labour costs, that we would fulfil that gap in due course, right? So we monitored labour inflation, and we oversaw, and we are overseeing the cost of labour in the market. And if there is a spike in that, we take that cost. That's a kind of a macro risk. There was things like consumables, equipment costs. That again, the cost of fibre was escalating in 2019. Now, we were saying you can't project that this is going to continue like that. It actually has flattened out and come back. Pedro will know this. But we said we'll take the cost of equipment. We'll take the cost of escalation of that. We'll take that risk, right? And that removed a huge amount of cost out of the project purely by having that arrangement. And at the initiation of the project, we bore that risk and any escalation and cost of that. As the project's moved on, the risk profile has dropped because now these things are much more controllable. They're much more predictable, and new investors have come in since because they say, okay, the profile of this project is now, the risk profile is much lower, and we anticipate that'll happen again. When it gets to an operate, when the deployment's finished, it'll happen again. So we're managing and collaborating and getting this agreed share of risk was a key enabler in our project to drive down the overall cost of the project.
Yeah. The contract assumptions,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So, like we told, when you're making your bid, assume the labour inflation will go up by, I'll just take a figure, 1% per year. If it goes beyond 1%, we'll pay the difference. Don't price in a risk premium in your project. And that eliminated a pretty significant amount of cost out of the project. And we had 12 of those assumptions that we gave to potential bidders. Very practical, like for just one more example was, we're rolling out fibre inducting, that is, an overhead cable that is 4 times the circumference of the Earth. It's a massive, massive project. It's the largest fibre deployment in Europe, right? And it, the number of blockages that you encounter in a duct in each kilometre is an unknown. Until you get on and you actually understand how many blockages, like in an old legacy duct, how many blockages do you have to clear? Mm-hmm. And bidders had from 20 to 50 blockages per kilometre but priced into their bid. And we said, oh, no. We'll pay for the blockages, right? We'll clear the blockages. You assume there's 15. And if there's 17 or 18, we'll pay the difference, right? Now, that took out hundreds of millions out of this project.
Yeah.
So that's just a risk share mechanism that we came out of. So,
okay.
Thanks.
So I think, this combination between the financier and the government is a real key thing. How does it look from the operator perspective, Amory? What sort of finance would you be looking to do to keep extending fibre further?
Exactly. So, sure, we need you both. But it's not enough. What do you think?
Yes.
So what we continue is really to push innovation in how to get financing. A way that we solved it, and we have demonstrated it already, it's doing cooperation with electricity company, cooperation with alternative builds, cooperation with cable operator, also cooperation type with municipality locally. So, because either they bring money or they can bring infrastructure in the deal. Infrastructure is also a type of financing for us, and it's a very important part of the way we get the help and the support to bring the infrastructure on those type of areas. So cooperation can really happen for us. It's a very positive way. If also in a cooperation some infrastructure, basis infrastructure is brought in the deal, that has a huge value for us. And it's a way to gain time instead of running after working permit or building permits. We just make it happen together. Mm-hmm. So it's really how innovative you are in the way to get the money, either in pure cash or in a value of passive infrastructure.
Mm.
Okay. I'm going to turn to the audience, if that's okay. Are there any, because we've only got a couple of minutes or so left, are there any questions from the audience that you would like to ask the panelists? Well, if you just wait a minute, we'll bring a mic. Please say your name and who you're from, please.
Hi, my name is Klaus. I'm your guy from Stockholm. I work at PTS, the Swedish regulator. So my question is, I suppose, for the entire panel, but I would like to paint up a scenario first. Imagine that the whole network, the rural network now is rolled out. You have all these stakeholders that built it, they financed it, they connected to people in the rural areas. And you're looking at networks that were supposed to be about 50 years in the ground. How do you make sure that the OPEX doesn't just kill the case? Precisely. And you get a scenario, in the Swedish scenario, is that the copper decommission is basically a threat to existing connections. In other countries, it might be a possibility, but for us, it was a threat. How do you make sure that the fiber networks don't experience that same threat and being decommissioned in the long term? Thank you.
Volunteers from the panel?
I mean, I'll start. I'm sure there's some, Patrick and others have some ideas here. But, in the finance in the U.S., it's for CapEx, not for OpEx. And we do have a program called Universal Service Fund that provides rural operators OpEx, and that's right now, not sure what the future of that fund is going to be. So I think you mentioned a couple things. So first of all, copper retirement, I think, is critical for every country because the burden on operators, incumbent operators, to have to maintain the dead network is very, very expensive, and every dollar that you're spending on that, you're not spending on OpEx for the future. And so, of course, being able to kind of get everybody in an even playing field to be able to do that. The other part of this is once you have a fiber infrastructure in place, the OpEx reductions are really extremely beneficial to those operators, and to be able to, so once you get the revenue, you're able to connect subscribers and be able to have those revenue streams. You should be able to have, if you have quality operators, to be able to, those subscribers, you should be able to fund enough revenue to do the OpEx. But it's really important that you clear the decks on the old infrastructure and be able to focus that revenue on servicing the operations of the future.
Any other comments?
Well, yeah, I'd just say thanks, Klaus. I'd agree. It is a concern. I suppose I heard yesterday from the regulators, probably they're looking to deregulate the wholesale market potentially, not the passive infrastructure market. But I think that's why legislators, regulators, they need to keep an eye to make sure critical infrastructure is maintained. If it's not, then maybe have the tools to step in and make sure it does happen.
Yeah. Okay. Right. We are out of time. I hope from this session you have got, if I call it, a more upbeat view of trying to get beyond 90% than perhaps I was hearing in some of the sessions yesterday, because you've heard that it actually can be done, and with the right focus, it's basically it's achievable. So with that, I'd like to thank the panel.
Thank you, Ian.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.